resident Gemini, Maria Riegger, and welcome to my channel. This is Positive Parenting with Astrology, and today we are talking about how to teach your Scorpio child healthy boundaries. So are you the parent of a child who has their sun in Scorpio or who has their moon sign in the sign of Scorpio? Do you sometimes find that your child is a little bit enmeshed with you, or are you encouraged to become too enmeshed with your child? Are you hoping to understand your Scorpio child better? Do you feel like sometimes they hover over you? Do you feel like sometimes they kind of really test your boundaries to the point of even violating your boundaries, especially for older kids? Are you a parent who themselves may have poor boundaries or less than healthy boundaries? Maybe your parents had very poor boundaries growing up. Maybe they did not respect your boundaries, and that caused you to grow into an adult who had poor boundaries, who maybe displayed some codependent behavior, became a people pleaser, who had to learn to say no. That describes me. That was my kind of healing journey as an adult and as a parent. So if any of those questions or issues pertain to you, then this video is for you. We're going to give a short overview of Scorpio, the Scorpio sign and Scorpio energy. We're going to talk about attachment and Scorpio energy, and I'm going to give you some tips for how to instill healthy boundaries in your Scorpio child. And I really cannot overemphasize how important it is to make sure your Scorpio child has healthy attachment to the parents and has healthy boundaries. We're going to talk about why it's so important. So Scorpio is a water sign, a feminine energy sign, and a fixed sign. So fixed signs means that it is more intent on maintaining things as they were before, on maybe changing things to make things as they were before. It is not a sign that weathers transitions as well as cardinal or maybe mutable energy signs. So it has a hard time with transitions, like to kind of maintain the status quo, harder time with change. Feminine energy sign means that it approaches life more from a place of emotion and intuition than logic. A water sign, all the water signs are feminine energy signs. So water sign means, again, that it approaches the world from a place of emotion and makes decisions based on how they're feeling at the time, on maybe how other people are feeling. They make those decisions and approach issues more from that place of emotion and intuitive feeling and gut reaction, more so than kind of analytically looking at things and being logical. Because Scorpio is fixed water, Scorpio people tend to dwell on things, okay? And they tend to be serious. They tend to dwell on emotions, including negative emotions. It is a common complaint from parents of Scorpio children who talk to me to tell me that their children kind of dwell on the negative. This is normal for Scorpio kids, and you should kind of let them have their feelings and kind of come out of their negative feelings on their own and help them identify and articulate those feelings. We all have negative feelings. You cannot avoid them. They are a part of life. You can teach your Scorpio children to deal with the feelings in an emotionally healthy way. Scorpio people also have big emotions, and they are sometimes embarrassed by the depth of emotion they're feeling. And they have this need to be vulnerable and to form these close attachments to people, but they're afraid of being hurt. This is the great dichotomy of Scorpio. Scorpio people seek relationships, connection, and attachment, but are afraid of being emotionally vulnerable. They need it to feel fulfilled, the vulnerability. They need that to feel fulfilled, but they're afraid of it at the same time. So there's this constant push-pull, even with the parents. You may feel that your older Scorpio child sometimes pushes you away, but they need you. They need the presence of the parent, even though they don't articulate that in the moment. If you give your Scorpio child, your older child, some alone time, I guarantee you that after a few minutes or a few hours, they will come and seek you out for your calming presence. That's just the nature of the sign. That constant push-pull will always be there. The way to handle that, one of the ways to handle that as a parent, is to always be calm and kind of give your child what they need emotionally at that time, whether it's a shoulder to cry on, or they need you to listen to them, or they just need to be alone. You give them what they need, what they appear to need, what they tell you to need at the time. And obviously, Scorpio children, as all children, need emotional validation from the parent. They need their worldview to be validated. They need their emotions to be validated. You need to tell them it is okay to feel whatever you're feeling. If you're feeling strongly about something, that's okay. If you're feeling bad about something, that's okay, right? If the parent responds to that the showing of emotion with calm, with love, with understanding, the Scorpio child will be more and more inclined to attach to the parent and to share things with the parent because it's obvious the parent is a safe space that will not respond to them with judgment and criticism when they share their feelings. So Scorpio is a sign that needs close attachment. Scorpio children in general need more attachment and attention from parents than the average child. They certainly need it more than like Aries and Sagittarian children. Okay. Those other children tend to be a little more independent when they're young. Okay. So Scorpio needs the attachment and attention from parents. Scorpio, as we've talked about in other videos, is very slow to trust. The natural inclination of Scorpio is to distrust people or treat them neutrally, treat them as if they're neither trustworthy, nor distrustful, right? Um, Now, some parents think that just because they're the parent, they're automatically trustworthy. That is not the case for a Scorpio child. A parent has to earn the trust of a Scorpio child just like everyone else. The good thing is that when you've earned their trust, which may take a while, when you've earned their trust and they deem you to be somebody who is trustworthy, worthy of their time and attention, they attach very closely. They almost identify with the other person. Scorpio is a sign that when they decide to attach to someone who is worth their time, worth their love, worth their trust, they tend toward enmeshment. Okay, so this is the challenge that we're talking about in this video because it's that tendency to toward enmeshment with other people and relationships, which risks Scorpio having unhealthy boundaries. It's almost as if they want to combine with the energy of the person. So when kids are really young, like babies, young toddlers, they want to be held a lot and you should hold them. They need to be held. That's a need they have at the moment. You need to hold them, right? And as they get older and more mobile, they want the parent around. Okay. So and when kids get older, like past the toddler stage, elementary, and then middle school, they're more independent, obviously, and don't need the parent to like be holding them and stuff all the time. But they want the parent around. They like having the parent there with them. The calming presence of the parent is kind of very soothing to them. And as kids get older, obviously, they need the presence of the parent less and less. They still need you. They definitely need you for emotional support, for practical guidance, and still for affection. It's just that they're naturally getting older and more independent, which is normal, and that's what you want, right? Now, but they need to attach. That's how they kind of attach when they're younger. And what we're talking about, the attachment, all that stuff, that's all good stuff. None of this is bad, right? This is all good stuff. But it's the nature of Scorpio because it's a water sign, a fixed sign, to be very empathic and to identify very strongly with the emotions and the emotional experience of the other person in the relationship. And we all know, most of us know, I had to learn it as an adult, that it is not healthy to allow other people to define your emotional experience. For example, when you're in a relationship, you don't have to have a bad day or be in a bad mood or feel a certain feeling because your partner is feeling that way. Your partner can be expressing negative emotion. It doesn't mean you have to have a bad day and let your positive feelings just go out the window, right? It's not healthy. You don't let people define your emotional experience. You don't let people dictate to you how you should feel. So this is the risk we're talking about, is if a Scorpio child is raised with kind of the idea that they're supposed to identify with the emotions of the other person, they're supposed to be enmeshed. When they're an adult, they run the risk of having unhealthy boundaries, right? And not respecting the healthy boundaries of other people. And this is what we're trying to work with here. So now we're going to talk about some tips to make sure that your Scorpio child has healthy boundaries. First of all, I'm going to preface this by saying that if you have any healing work to do yourself, if you are a people pleaser, if you have poor boundaries, you need to do the healing work to have healthy boundaries. Because it's really difficult to teach your child about healthy boundaries if you do not have healthy boundaries yourself. And when my son was very little, I messed up a lot because I just didn't know enough about childhood development, and I didn't know what was normal, what was not normal for a baby, for a toddler. And when he was a toddler, I made a lot of mistakes, right? So take it from me that I don't want you to make these mistakes, and I don't want you to, suffer yourself with having poor boundaries, because people who have poor boundaries suffer. It's almost like they lose their identity in a way because they feel like they don't have the right to have boundaries, and that's not true. You have the right to have boundaries, including with your kids. So the first thing we're going to talk about is something I've brought up before, which is this: allow your Scorpio child to say no to you. Kids should be allowed to say no to parents respectfully, right? If they don't want to do something and they say, I don't want to do this, you can have a conversation with them. And this is mostly geared for older kids, although the toddlers, that's one of the first words they learn. The older babies, the first word they learn is to say no. And it's partly because they're learning that they are separate from the parents and they are asserting their individuality and their autonomy. And this is all normal childhood development. So when kids are older, if you ask them to do something and they say no, or no, I don't want to, yeah, I get that. A lot of us don't do things we don't want to do. Here's why this is important that you do this. If it can wait, well, when would you like to do it? So in other videos, I've talked about ways to get your child to do stuff. And one of those ways is to give them say in when they do certain things, unless it's something very time sensitive. But the bottom line is your kids should be allowed to say no to you. And as I told my therapist one day, and she said this was right, not always right, but I was right this one time, I guess. I told her, I said, I figured out if a child cannot say no to their own parents respectfully, then who can they say no to? My therapist said, yeah, that's right. Kids should be allowed to say no to their parents respectfully. This is part of, autonomy, consent. We talk about bodily consent, but it's also about emotional consent, right? And what we do, not just with our bodies, but in general. Okay, so that's the first thing. If you really need your kid to do something they don't want to, depending on what it is, so we'll talk about this in future videos and courses. Depending what it is, there are ways to deal with that. But in general, they should be allowed to say no respectfully to parents without, punishment. You should never punish them for saying no. What is that teaching them? That they're upholding their own boundaries and you're punishing them for that? That is a surefire way to raise a child into an adult with very poor boundaries, who was easily taken advantage of. Trust me, because I was that adult for a long time. And similar to that, children should be allowed to talk back. I don't call it talking back. I call it self-championing, standing up for themselves. Again, always respectfully. It's not okay for them to be disrespectful. It's not okay for them to use curse words. Not that they would do that, who knows. So they should be allowed to talk back. So when I hear parents say talk back, usually they describe it like this. The parent says something to the child and the child says, well, I don't want to do that. Or they say, well, this is a bad idea, or they're defending themselves somehow. Or the parent says, don't do this, and the child explains why they were doing something. And the parent says, don't explain, just do what I tell you to do. Well, children should be allowed to explain themselves. So that's when I say talk back, a lot of parents describe talking back in those terms, in those situations. The parent says to do something, or the parent says not to do something, and the child is explaining why they did something or why they did not do something, and the parent doesn't want to hear it. You should allow your child to explain. You can decide after their explanation, yeah, I understand why you were doing that, but here's why it's not a good idea to do that now. Okay? Why would you punish your child for opening up a conversation, right? The parent-child relationship, children are adults, they're not robots, right? You can't program them to do certain things without any response. That's just not how it works, okay? And if you teach your children abject obedience and not to question authority, they will grow up into an adult who is always seeking permission to do things and who doesn't feel like they have authority or autonomy over themselves and their bodies, and that is very unhealthy. Okay, third is to help them deal in a healthy way with their feelings, especially their negative feelings. And we've talked about this in other videos too on Scorpio children. One extreme is to bottle up and repress all the feelings. That's not healthy. And the other extreme is to just overreact emotionally to everything all the time. And the healthy way to deal with emotions is to name the emotion, articulate the emotion, maybe try to explore why you're feeling this way, and kind of sit with it for a bit and let it go. And the most important part of this is for the adult to model that for the kids, one, and then two, for the adult to help the child name and articulate the feelings, right? Now, my son is older now, so he's good. He's gotten very good at saying, I feel, you hurt my feelings when you said this, or so-and-so said this and it hurt my feelings, or now I feel like I can't trust this person. So he can identifying it is like half the battle. Just identifying the emotion and maybe why you feel that way in the moment is half the battle. So, but you certainly do not want to suggest to your Scorpio child that they need to repress or just not show emotion. That's why it's extremely triggering for me when I hear adults say to kids, "Don't cry, quit your crying," especially young kids. They cry partly because they don't have the words to express what they're going through emotionally. So they should be allowed to show the emotion. And if you help them deal with the emotions in a healthy way, they will not need to dramatically overreact emotionally to everything that happens to them. And it's important to emphasize with the Scorpio child that no one has the right to dictate their emotional experience. If they are feeling badly or a negative emotion, other people don't have the right to tell them you should not feel that way because XYZ. Or I know you feel that way about that, but look at all these other good things. Well, you can feel good about some things and bad about other things. I mean, you can feel grateful for everything that you have and disappointed about other things that didn't happen the way you want. That's fine. That's allowed. But you should not let anyone else define your emotional experience. And that means that you should not define the emotional experiences for other people. Because Scorpio runs the risk of enmeshment in relationships by teaching them that they have this power and these boundaries, these emotional boundaries for themselves, teaches them to give those emotional boundaries and respect those boundaries for other people. And to that end, you're teaching them that they are not dependent on the emotional uh, outlook or experiences of other people. They are not hostage to anyone's emotions. I'll sometimes be in a bad mood for whatever reason, and I'll tell my son, "I'm just in a bad mood today. It's probably hormonal or whatever. It has nothing to do with you, and nothing bad happened. I'm just feeling blah, or I'm just feeling, I don't know." It's hard to tell sometimes. I'm a Gemini. My feelings change like hourly, sometimes by the minute. So I tend to be, at least I tend to be moody sometimes. But I'm honest about it. I'll say, "Hey, I'm just feeling blah. Nothing to do with you, and nothing bad even happened. I'm just feeling blah. Maybe it's the weather. I don't know. But it has nothing to do with you. You are not, uh, required to feel blah just because I feel blah, right?" Okay. And also teach your Scorpio child that they are sovereign beings, separate entities apart from the parent. I see this all the time. It's going to be the subject of future videos and courses on this channel. That the parents often push the kids to be like the parents, to do the activities the parents did at their age, to like the things the parents like, to pursue the goals the parents want to pursue. Your kids are different from you. Yeah, they have some of your genes, but they're different from you. So they're not going to like what you like. They're not going to want to do what you want to do. They're not going to spend their time as you did when you were a 7-year old or a 10-year old. And this is really important too because Scorpio runs the risk of enmeshment and they are vulnerable to always seeking the approval of the parent. So if parents withhold their approval and grant their approval when the kids do things that the parents want them to do, setting up a very bad dynamic for later in life when your kids are older, become adults, and are on their own. You don't want them to do things only for other people's approval. I did a lot, as other adults I've talked to, did a lot of things I did not want to do because I thought I just had no say in what I wanted. I thought I had to please the other person all the time. And you don't. You're a separate person. And if you don't want to do something, say you don't want to do something. So I can't really overstate the importance of this. Your children are different from you. They're not going to pursue the path that you pursued, right? They're not going to want to do the things you wanted to do at their age. They're not going to like the same things or dislike the same things that you like and dislike. They're not going to have the same traits. And to that end, you never want to suggest to them that your love and affection is conditional on them doing things you want them to do, on your approval. It is not a quid pro quo relationship, right? You love them because you love them, period, the end. It doesn't matter. I always tell my son, nothing you could do could ever make me love you less. Nothing, right? And sometimes he'll apologize for getting like a C. I'm like, what are you apologizing to me for? Did you understand the material? This material is important, right? So for life skills. So if you don't understand it, we'll get you help so that you understand it. But I'm not mad, and I don't care if you got a C on a test. My love is not, and approval is not contingent on that. You never want to suggest to children that they must behave a specific way or do specific things to win love and approval from other people. That's a very dangerous dynamic to set up. They are worthy of love because they are human beings. And children instinctively want to please the parents and the caregiver, especially Scorpio children, because they really need that attachment from parents. And if the only way they get the attachment is to do things to please the parents and win the approval of the parents, and if the parents show disapproval or withhold affection when they don't do what the parent wants, they learn quickly that the love and affection and attachment is conditional. And that's what we're trying to avoid here. And related to that, you have to be very careful about raising your child with the idea that they need permission to do everything. We all know people, maybe we are those people, as I was as an adult, that think we need permission from others to do anything, that we don't really believe that we have autonomy over our own experiences. I'm sure we all know those people who maybe you're at a friend's house or at a party and they don't leave. They feel like they can't leave. It's because they're waiting for permission. Maybe you're out and having a good time and you don't want to leave. That's different. But if you want to leave and other people are saying, no, no, stay longer. And you're like, well, I got to get up early tomorrow. I got to work. I'm kind of tired, kind of overstimulated. No, no, stay. And you let them convince you to stay because you're waiting for them to say, you know what? It's okay. You can go home. You don't need anyone's permission to do anything. And you don't want to raise your kids with the idea that they always need permission to do stuff, right? I wrote about this in one of my books. When I went to Catholic school, we needed permission to go get a drink from the water fountain. We needed permission to go to the bathroom. Sometimes the teachers told us we couldn't go. We could not get water. I remember being like not really dying of thirst. I'm exaggerating. I remember being really thirsty, like parched, and I wasn't able to go get water. Can you imagine a situation where you're not able to go relieve your bodily functions or hydrate when you need it? That you always need permission? Don't even get me started about schools. It's a different subject. But you don't want to raise your kids thinking that they need permission to do everything. Depending on the age of the child, yeah, they may need permission for some things, but you don't want to raise them believing that they always need permission to do like basic things, okay? Because that leads them into becoming adults who always look for other people to give them permission to do things. And they abdicate their autonomy to other people. And that is very dangerous because most people, when you're an adult, most people are not looking out for your best interest. They're looking out for their best interests. As a parent, you definitely want to show acceptance of your child however they are, right? But you don't want to condition your love and affection on approval. And that's a lot of parents don't even realize they're doing that. To be frank and to be fair to them, I'm sure if you ask them that, they would say, "Oh yeah, my kid knows I love them no matter what." But they'll do things like their body language, or they'll approve of grades and show disapproval at bad grades or other things. And once in a while is one thing, but when that is a pattern, when you are teaching the child is they need to perform and do these things in order to get love and affection from people. So I talk about my life occasionally, and I use examples from my life on this channel. And my mother and I are very different. We're just very different. I'm a huge introvert. I prefer being alone over being with other people. I like being with people like a one-on-one, but I don't like being at like huge events. I don't like small talk. I basically don't like anything superficial. Like it has to have meaning for me, including conversation. Like my fulfillment in meeting comes from comes internally, right? I don't need external validation from people for the most part. My mother is very different. She's a Leo sun, so she always, like not always, but often has an entourage of people around, needs other people. Fire is an element that needs air to exist, so needs other people around her most of the time, needs people to cater to her, needs a lot of praise, is very social, like life of the party. And when I was a kid, she would push me to do these things I was not comfortable with. Like, I don't even remember getting to decide what I did for my birthday. It was always some big party or some big event that I didn't want because I wanted things more low key, but I didn't get a say. Even as a teenager, I didn't get a say in how to celebrate my own birthday. I preferred to be in my room alone reading, and that's what I like to do, these kind of internally focused pursuits. And I was criticized for that. I was criticized as antisocial. I was criticized as other things. So, but my parents didn't really even take the time to understand me, right? I was different, ergo, it was a bad thing. How I was a bad thing. And that's very dangerous because you're suggesting to your child that there's something wrong with them because they're not like you. But that is not correct. They are just different, right? So I talk to a lot of parents now who thankfully they understand, well, my kid is a more introvert, or my kid doesn't like to do this, or my kid prefers online gaming with friends to kind of, I don't know, running outside with a bunch of friends. While all kids should get outside activity and fresh air and should not be in front of a screen all the time, you want to recognize that about your kids, that they may prefer to do things differently from you, and that is okay. The last big thing I want to leave you with is this. I've said this in other videos about Scorpio kids. Scorpio is largely about power and autonomy. Scorpio kids like to have power over things. So the more say you give to the Scorpio kid when they get older, the easier time you will have, most likely, because they have some say in what happens to them. So wanting to have power, especially power over yourself, it's not a bad thing. Again, we want to encourage our children to stand up for themselves, self-champion, especially if they're being treated unfairly and unjustly, right? We want them to advocate for themselves. We all want that as parents. So if the child doesn't learn healthy boundaries, not only are they going to have poor boundaries, they're not always going to respect the boundaries of other people, right? And obviously in relationships, that sets up for a problematic dynamic. And when you're in a relationship with a Scorpio person, you're going to have to maintain your healthy boundaries. And on the flip side, the Scorpio person actually respects that, right? When the other person in the relationship talks about their boundaries and has healthy boundaries, they respect it. If they're emotionally healthy, they respect it. And one thing I've noticed is that people with a lot of Scorpio energy in their chart tend to end up in relationships with other Scorpio people, or Scorpio people who have a lot of Scorpio energy, like a Scorpio sun or moon or rising sign. Chances are, if you have a Scorpio child, their partner is also going to have a lot of Scorpio energy in their chart. So it behooves you to teach your Scorpio child about healthy boundaries, so they will be a healthy, emotionally healthy adult, and they will also treat their other adults, friends, partners, coworkers, in an emotionally healthy way, respecting boundaries, right? And having poor boundaries, being a people pleaser, that is a frequent complaint I hear from adults, that in that they are people pleasers, like I used to be. They had poor boundaries, like I used to have, because of the way they were conditioned as children. So that is one of the reasons why I am so passionate about teaching this, is because I want to help you, the adult, heal, right, from any trauma you had in your childhood, to have better boundaries yourself and enjoy life and have a fulfilling life, and also teach your kids about healthy boundaries so that they will have healthy boundaries and respect the boundaries of others. So that's it for today. We'll be back soon. Thank you very much for watching, and please subscribe to my channel, and you can click on the link in the video description to get on my mailing list. Thank you so much.